joining me today for this live stream. I apologize for my voice. I am still getting over a cold. I've been a little bit sick. Today what I wanted to talk about was leveling up communication and apologizing like a pro. And this is something that is really important to me and comes up a lot for my clients. The reason that I wanted to talk about apologizing like a pro is because I myself, of course, am not perfect. No matter what my profession is, no matter what it is that I'm doing, I am not a perfect person. And there are times when I am reactionary. Now, what does this mean? This means that I get triggered and I react like that. Now, I know that it is very easy to be triggered by things. It is very easy to react to things on the fly. But if you can take a moment to slow down and to really think about how is this going to affect this relationship with this person that I'm reacting to, then you're able to kind of get a sense of, okay, I know how I can slow down. I know that I can use the techniques that I have at my disposal, which for me in the moment was self-care. So what happened? I reacted in a very negative way towards a family member, and it was quick and I snapped. I mean, I popped off. And it's probably hard for a lot of people to imagine me popping off like in a negative way, but I lose my temper sometimes. I think we all do. And when I did that, I immediately regretted it. So I just decided, okay, how am I going to get myself into a position where I am able to clearly communicate to this person that I need to apologize, but at the same time be respectful of my own feelings, be respectful of the fact that I was triggered, yes, because of something that was incredibly hurtful to me, but that person was also hurt too. So it's not about being comparative in any capacity. I'm not comparing pains between people because there's always black, white, but especially there's gray, as I've talked about before. And a lot of the times I prefer living in the gray because living in black and white is a really negative cognitive distortion. So what happened? I popped off, I went to my room, and I took a shower. Immediately, I felt so much better. And I went immediately afterwards and I apologized to this person and I said, I should not have spoken to you this way and I apologize. And I left it at that. I left it short and succinct because I know when I owe someone an apology, and it's important to me that my clients understand that just because we have our feelings, it doesn't mean that we have to be reactionary towards everyone. That's one of the things that we work on a lot in coaching with me, is learning how to avoid the immediate reaction. For everything, of course, there's a cause and an effect, but I like to think for every trigger, there is a reaction. This can be internal or this can be external. But being able to communicate about it clearly is incredibly important. Sometimes slowing down, speaking a little bit more slowly, truly thinking about what it is that we want to say, and sometimes even taking notes, which is why I even have my notebook here right now, because I know that in the future this is going to be helpful to one of my clients as well. Even though I've experienced this with some of my clients, there are times when I just have a stream of consciousness and I'm like, oh, let me write that down. This could be helpful to somebody. I often find in my life that a lot of times I'm mirroring a lot of other people, and I stay away from watching the news. I stay pretty much in my own little bubble for a lot of reasons. The main reason being is that I like to curate my life, and I always encourage people to curate their own lives. Whether it's engaging in a digital detox, whether it's engaging in removing yourself from toxic people, whether it's engaging in something positive, which for me is comedy. And I've learned a lot from watching podcasts. I've learned a lot about communication, especially when there's two comedians speaking with each other. I have learned so much. A great example of this is the podcast Take Your Shoes Off with Rick Glassman. Oh, thank you. Thank you, V. I appreciate that. So, in Take Your Shoes Off with Rick Glassman, I've been really watching him and kind of studying him over the last few years. And what I've noticed is thank you so much for the like. And what I've noticed is that he really has an interesting way of speaking. He has an interesting point of view and a very interesting personality. And he's really great at interviewing. But when you watch someone that's really good at interviewing, you also want to watch someone who is able to provide good commentary. Now, everyone is going to have their own opinion. I believe that everyone in their own way is completely biased. And that's because of their own experiences, their own life story. Everyone's is different. The biggest thing too when it comes to communication and why it's important sometimes to slow down and why it speaks to me especially is because when I was growing up, I suffered from a issue with my speech, and I had to see a speech therapist. And it was for a slur, and it was also for stuttering. And at the time, it was so embarrassing. I'll never forget being in 7th grade, and we were going around the room in a line, and we were reading from a book. And reading from this book, when it got to me, of course, I stuttered on all of the syllables. I mean, even saying my own name, Jenna, I would even just go, like I could not get it out. And I think the reason for that was because we had made a big move when I was about 10 years old from a very small town to a larger populated town. And I was really angry about that. And I think what I did is I internalized all of that. And I allowed myself to become reactionary to things that normally I would be excellent at. I love to read, and I love to learn, and I'm always a big believer that we are all capable of constantly learning and growing as long as we keep our minds and our hearts open to those possibilities. The bigger the possibility that we have for ourselves for learning and growing, the better it is for us because the more enrichment we're going to be able to gain from it. Now, ironically, when it came to this issue that I had yesterday, I did immediately apologize, but I did so after taking care of myself. And I've always said this, that it's very important that we take care of ourselves first. In order to take care of anybody else, you have to first be able to self-soothe and to self-care. And that can be in the form of many things. It could be something as simple as applying lotion to your skin. It can be something as simple as applying makeup to your face. It can be something as simple as just taking a shower like I did. Anything to release or to feel like you're releasing, having the symbolism of releasing these toxic emotions, these toxic things where even if you're triggered in the moment, you can learn to process it alone. Oftentimes we feel like we need to process things with other people, and that's not always necessarily true. Although if you do seek the help of a coach like myself, or the help of a counselor or a therapist, more power to you. Some people do need to be able to respond to something, to be able to respond to another person, to be able to process things through. But there's a lot of other people I'm finding through what I do that they're actually really good at processing things by themselves. And I think a lot of this is because of COVID. We all were kind of stuck in our own bubbles, and we had the lockdowns, and we had all of these things that made us all a lot more isolated. But in a way, if you try to find the positive in that, it also made us have the ability to be much more self-reliant. Now, I'm not saying to go and isolate in any capacity. I'm just saying that for some people, it's easier for them to process things alone. I happen to be one of those people. However, I know that when I have insights and things I feel like I need to share, I'm going to come on here and I'm going to share them with you because I know that when I'm sharing, I'm helping. I know that this can speak to someone out there. And again, I apologize for my voice. I've been sick and I'm just still, pushing through. Human design has helped me so much with all of this especially. And in my live streams, when I was reading from the Gene Keys books by Richard Rudd, I noticed that I was getting demonetized. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue those readings, but I'm going to do it in the tiers of membership. And then I'm not going to do them in the public sphere, except for once in a while, just because I feel like it's really important information to know and to digest. And I feel like it can really help you. Now, when it comes to apologizing, it doesn't mean you have to guilt trip yourself. It doesn't mean that you have to live from a place of guilt. In human design, what it says as my primary motivation is guilt, but the other side of that is actually hope. And I always come from a place of hope, except when I'm being reactionary. But taking responsibility for our actions, for the things that trigger us, exactly. Or correcting your behavior. You don't necessarily have to change completely, because change does take time. Real change is always going to take time. But you're right, V. Changing the behavior, choosing to do something differently, that is what is going to get you to that next level. That is what's going to get you to be free of guilt, to be free of that negativity. Now, we all have normal human emotions. We all sway left and right, up and down. And that's completely normal, and that's completely okay. It's okay to sway. It's okay to experience normal human emotions. There's nothing wrong with these things. There is such a thing as there is such a thing as toxic positivity. And what that is not allowing yourself to experience your emotions when you need to. Does that mean you have to process your emotions immediately? No, you do not. If you need to take time to process your emotions at a different time than whenever you're experiencing something that maybe might feel traumatic or difficult or hard for you to process in that moment, it's perfectly okay to put like a pause on that and to then process it later on at a different time. Just try not to wait too long so it doesn't sink into your skin, sink into your body, and start to build a resentment. Some people are incredibly good at compartmentalizing, and this is something that I've had to learn how to do. Reason being is because I spent a lot of time in my life being very easily triggered by a lot of different things. I allowed myself to be a victim of a lot of different things for a lot of different reasons. A lot of it wasn't my fault, but it still victimized me, and I still carried out in my life all that victimization. And I continue to this day to do shadow work. I continue to this day to work on myself so that way I can be a better coach, and so I can provide the most help that I can to the most amount of people. Hey, Mac! Hey, don't forget to email me or to DM me on Instagram so we can get started on your coaching sessions, okay? But a lot of times, thank you so much for the like. So again, apologizing succinctly without getting into too much detail, without revisiting the trauma and revisiting that whole experience is probably going to be the best thing for you. Now, because I do have OCD, or a version of it. And again, I apologize, I've been sick, so that's why I sound like shit. Or, oops, I don't sound well. When it comes to apologizing, with OCD, for me at least, it's like having a lot of thoughts and a lot of things on a loop. And I've had a lot of clients tell me that they've experienced something very similar to this, where there's a loop that's constantly playing, and they'll play the same situation over and over and over again. And this is something that's truly hard to live with and truly hard to deal with. But at the same time, we can always try to see this as a potential gift. And what I mean by that is that our ability to process and to analyze things over and over again might be something that's helpful. But we have to learn how to stop in the moment when it's starting to become painful or hurtful to ourselves. Not in the sense that you want to eliminate pain from your life, because you can learn so much from your pain You can learn so much from your hurt. When your feelings get hurt, that's an opportunity to learn and to grow. It's an opportunity to look inside of yourself and to see, what is it that I'm reacting to? Why am I reacting to this? Excuse me. And how is it that I can, in the future, be able to not react in this way if you feel as though you're reacting in a negative way? So there's a difference between reacting negatively, reacting neutrally, and reacting positively. When you're able to react neutrally, what you're able to do is kind of see it from a third party standpoint. You're kind of able to almost like address yourself in the situation from a third party point of view. And with my particular OCD, I see a lot of things in threes, and that's just been something that I've kind of seen my whole life. When it comes to seeing things in threes, it's just easier for me to make sense of things so I can explain them a little bit more easier. That's just how my brain processes it. So reacting negatively, what could this mean? Reacting negatively, honestly, is very much a personal, like it's the way that you process it personally. It's the way that you choose, because we all have that inner dialogue. We all have that, is this, if you want to take it to a two, the angel and the devil, or having two angels, or having two devils, or just having you, a shadow you, and a gift or a city you, if you want me to use Gene Key's speak. The shadow, again, is when you're in a darker place. The gift is when you're in a more of a neutral place and in a more of an accepting place. And the city is a point of when you're really living your gift, when you're truly enlightened, when you're truly in a place of positivity, light, goodness, where everything just feels great. And this is not something that you're going to be experiencing all of the time. We're going to go through the waves, the ebbs and the flows, every time. But it's learning how to control these waves and learning how to control our feelings, our thoughts, our emotions. That's how we push through. So reacting negatively could mean that you snap. Reacting negatively could mean that you do something to hurt yourself, which I've been very honest about in the past. I was a self-mutilator. So I attributed that very much to my religion. I felt as though, Jesus experienced a lot of pain and went through a lot of pain, but for the benefit of everybody else, for Jews and Gentiles. But causing yourself pain, giving yourself scars, I think we can say for the most part, that's a pretty negative thing. So hurting yourself with the intention of leaving a scar, whether that's emotional or physical, that would be reacting negatively. That's just one example. That's what I'm going to use because it's something that applies to my personal life. And I have to be very careful with HIPAA, and I can't really give out too much about my clients. Reacting neutrally is giving yourself the time to pause and reflect. So what does this mean? Let's say that you're getting triggered by something. What I need for you to understand is that when you're triggered by something, this is something inside of you. This is not something because of somebody else. You have a choice. Maybe financially you don't have the choice to leave a certain situation. Excuse me again. I'm telling you, I've been dealing with this cold and it has been killing me. So pausing and reflecting when you are reacting neutrally, that's when you're in a safe state of mind. Reacting positively is serving hate, neutrality, or love with love. So I'm going to write that down. Serving hate, love, or neutrality with love regardless. Regardless. And this is definitely difficult because sometimes when we're apologizing, yes, I will. Thank you so much, Mac. I've been doing that. um, when you are given, something that can be described as toxic, right? Or when you're given something that can be described as hate or love or neutrality, you always have the choice to respond with love, to respond with kindness, to come from a place of goodness, to come from a place of wanting to be your best self, not so much maybe for other people, but for yourself. I know for me personally, with all of these things that I do it because I know that it helps me and I know that it helps others. Now, I put myself first because I know that I am incredibly important, my time is incredibly important, and I want everyone to feel the exact same way about themselves, if possible. I want everyone to know how valuable their time is. And it's okay to volunteer your time to a cause that is important to you. It matters. Everything you say and everything you do, it matters, I promise you. My last live stream was demonetized, so I'm trying to speak very carefully right now. But my last live stream was demonetized, and at the time it only had 41 views, and I was like, oh, okay, that's not my standard. Usually it's higher, but that's okay. Well, I checked today and it was at over 1,000, and I was like, oh, okay. So this hit home for some people, or this was interesting to some people, to understand that there doesn't have to be shame when it comes to sensuality. I'm going to change the word up because I don't want this to be demonetized. But when we're apologizing, we have to also understand, I'm going to write this down too, just because you apologize does not ensure forgiveness. But just like V said, changed behavior, thank you for this, V, I'm going to steal it from you. Changed behavior can lead to authentic forgiveness. It's very easy to forgive, but is it forgiving authentically? And does that matter? Why are you apologizing? That's a bigger question. Are you apologizing just to make yourself feel better? Or are you apologizing because you know that you have hurt this other person? And not only do you want to kind of cleanse your palate, cleanse your guilt, but you also want to let that person know, hey, I'm truly sorry for popping off on you, or I'm truly sorry for allowing myself to be triggered by something that you said to me, or I'm truly sorry for whatever it is. You don't have to apologize for everything, and I'm definitely not saying to say I'm sorry all the time, because there's no need for it. If you're a mature person, you understand that we all experience a whole bunch of different types of emotions throughout the day. We all have different types of thoughts, we all think differently, and sometimes some people think similarly, especially when it's a family member, if it's someone that you're around a lot. A lot of people have a lot of difficulties with their family members because they spend a lot of time together and there's not enough space or there's not enough balance. So often we're talking about a work-life balance, but we're not talking enough about a family and a ourself balance, which is probably not the most succinct or best way to communicate that thought. That's just what's coming to mind. This is very much a stream of consciousness, as I like to flow. I prefer to flow and to put the things out there that I have seen that have helped me, that have helped others, but in a deconstructed way. And then I'll bring it back around. Very much like in comedy. So, with apologies, this is what I'm going to say. In my experience, and in the experience of a lot of my clients, do not apologize if it's not sincere. Let me repeat that. Do not apologize if it's not sincere. What this means is, what is the intent? The intent behind your apology is incredibly important for your own spiritual well-being. Thank you, Mac. So think a lot about your intent. Is this just to be self-serving? Is it to serve others, or is it to do both? And ideally, in my personal opinion, and I'm not saying that this is right for everybody, but in my personal opinion, if you're able to do both at the same time, that's probably the highest pinnacle of what you're doing when you're apologizing. Also with apologies, learning to change your reaction when it's affecting you negatively. Let me repeat that. Learning to change your reaction when it's affecting you negatively. What does this mean? If you are experiencing guilt because of the way that you're reacting to others, regardless of the situation, this is something that unfortunately you are doing to yourself, okay? And I know that this is very difficult to hear sometimes, because a lot of times it's very difficult for us to take responsibility for things that sometimes are out of our control. But the funny thing is that in order to attempt to regain control of our own little worlds, sometimes we have to just take responsibility. That doesn't mean that it's our fault. It just means that we're going to take ownership for our reactions. We're going to take ownership for the way that we feel. We're going to take ownership for the way that we react. And it's not always perfect. I was not perfect yesterday, and I felt as though I was in the wrong. I knew I needed to do a self-soothing technique, so I did that. I took a shower. I felt much better. Also, I'm sick, so it's very easy to trigger me right now, if I'm being honest. And I think anyone can totally identify with me. When you're sick, when you're not feeling good, it is so easy to trigger a person. When you're like, oh, I just need a drink. And like right now with this live stream, I forgot my drink inside. But I don't want to stop the live stream just to get my drink, because I'd have to walk quite a ways and change around the mechanics of the camera. But basically, you know, when you're sick, it's easy to pop off. You're not feeling well, your body's hurting, especially when you have an autoimmune condition or really any type of condition. I was speaking to somebody that suffers with spina bifida yesterday, and they're not a client, so it's okay for me to disclose that. And it was really interesting to hear their point of view. You know, here I am complaining about being sick, or not complaining, but, you know, sharing the fact that I am, you know, sick. I have a cold or the flu or something, because it's been about 3 days now. But speaking to somebody that has it more difficult than me, the reason that that conversation meant so much to me was because I realized, I was like, you know, here I am feeling sorry for myself when there's no need for me to. I have so many things that I can do, and this particular person is wheelchair bound. And I've actually been in a relationship with a person that was wheelchair bound, and I did have to take care of them, and seeing how they chose to deal with it, which was with alcoholism, was incredibly difficult. It was incredibly difficult to live through that. It was incredibly difficult to not feel as though all of these things were my fault, but through that experience, I learned a lot. And I learned, hey, I deserve to be with a person that matches where I'm at. I deserve to be with a person that is not physically and emotionally abusive. But that experience was something that I learned from, and it's not being in victim status. It's being in a status of, I take ownership and acknowledgement of having myself in that situation, of being drawn in. I do drink alcohol occasionally, but not very often. I probably haven't drank, oh gosh, I think the last time I drank, and this is gonna sound so silly, but my family doesn't really drink themselves. I do, but I just don't drink very often. Most of it has to do with being more health conscious, especially about my lupus. So, and it's super dehydrating. So I think the last time I drank might have been maybe 2 or 3 months ago. And I had like one like big tall boy of, what was it? Was it a White Claw or something like that? I think it was something like that. It was just one. But I'm not an alcoholic. I don't really suffer from that stuff. When I was younger, I partied, I did a whole bunch of stuff, and learned a lot of what I want to be and what I don't want to be. And it's easy to have addictive tendencies, as we all know. I'm a vapor, so that's my vice. Drinking is a vice that I'll do on special occasions, but it's so important to not be party to, or to drinking safely, right? Because again, we want to take ownership, we want to take responsibility for everything that we've done and everything we've experienced. And I've been in situations. Yeah, drinking is just one of those things where, and I'm responding to Mac, drinking is just one of those things where it's not really necessary, but for some people, depending on the amount that you drink, it does require a tapering. So again, I'm not a doctor, so don't, take everything as I say as Bible, but it's been my experience that people that have an addiction to benzos or to alcohol, you can use Librium, but you do need to see a doctor for this, obviously. And you're able to get on that to taper off of it. But if you're drinking a lot, and a lot, again, it's different for everybody because everybody's bodies are different, and some people can tolerate more alcohol than others. It also is dependent upon if you're drinking beer versus if you're drinking liquor versus if you're drinking mixed drinks. So it's different for everyone. But if you know that this is something that you want to cut down on, definitely doing a taper is going to be an easier way to make that type of change. If you notice that this is something that you're becoming reliant upon, well, it has the same effects as benzodiazepines, and benzodiazepines are prescribed to help with anxiety. So it's very possible that you are self-medicating, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I simply mean that as it's possible that you have found something that does help with your anxiety. It's just if you find that it's inhibiting your ability to function in your daily life, that's when it's becoming a problem. I don't think there's anything wrong with people having a drink. I just think that there has to be some type of balance to it, right? You don't want to be in a position where you're getting behind the wheel of a vehicle, or where you're getting, where you're drinking so much that you're blacking out, or where you're, those types of signs. But if it's something that does help you with your anxiety, it's very possible that you have found something to self-medicate with that is helping you. And I'm not going to tell you to stop, because think about it this way, to bring it back to the Bible real quick. Jesus turned water into wine. Back then, people didn't have medicine when they were going through childbirth and things like that. So because of that, why do you think there was wine? Or because of anxiety, or because of this and that, because of things people didn't think they could normally do. And because alcohol, ironically, can be a performance-enhancing substance in some situations, you just want to kind of think about it in that respect. If you subscribe to religion and to Jesus and to all of that, then you'll understand the point that I'm trying to make. I'm not trying to turn you or make you into a Christian. I'm simply saying, if a very big figure in the world turned water into wine, there must have been a reason, and a lot of times too, when it comes to the news, the media, we'll see a lot of talk about like people, drinking too much and being on the beach and getting super dehydrated, and then that's why they die. And it's like, well, yeah, because when you're outside in the sun, you're sweating, so you're depleting yourself of sodium, you're depleting yourself of things that your body does need. If you're drinking and you're in the sun, you're really dehydrating yourself. You could potentially not be giving yourself enough water, enough nutrients, especially if you're not eating. So there's responsible ways to consume alcohol. But what I found in my life personally is that when you're using too many substances, um, it will definitely impede your ability to apologize and to hold yourself accountable in a rational way, depending on how much you're using and depending on how much you are partaking in. I believe that all medicine should be legal. That's just my personal opinion. And there's a lot of different types of medicine out there. And just because someone has a very personal experience with a certain substance doesn't mean that, even if it was negative, it doesn't mean that it should turn off for everybody else. If someone is in control of our country, and I'm gonna be very careful with how I word this, and they have a personal experience with someone that had alcoholic tendencies, that doesn't mean that we should go prohibition status. Just because you haven't used substances in the past, and I'm not saying you should, what I'm saying is there are so many benefits. For a very long time we used opium. Opium was turned into heroin, turned into morphine, turned into all of these different things. And, we used those medicines back in the 1800s and the early 1900s. We saw a very big, we saw a lot from the whole Sackler situation, I'll put it that way. And what was their apology? Their apology was money. And they weren't even fined that much. So, apologizing like a pro is being authentic, is about actually coming clean, is about not only acknowledging your fault in a situation, and not to ruminate on it either, but to simply apologize authentically. If you feel like you have to be contrite and you have to do something to forgive yourself for your reaction or for your behavior, then do so. Just try for it not to be something that's going to harm yourself. When it comes to Cult of Wellness's stance is be well in all of the possible arenas that you can be. But does this mean that you're allowed to have vices? Does this mean that you're allowed to partake in certain things, partake in certain, medicine? Absolutely. If you choose to see everything as a form of medicine, you have to see it this way. Not all medicine is good, as the Sacklers have proved. And they also proved it through their advertising. But if you choose to see the substances that you're using as medicine and you decide to be your own chemist, really no one can stop you except for the federal government. So I'm going to stop right there because I really don't want this to be demonetized. So when it comes to leveling up your communication, maybe try to communicate when you're not sick. I should have taken my own advice. Try to speak clearly and succinctly. Try to be level-headed and calm. And also understand that if you're going to be in a triggering situation, to have tools in your toolbox to know of when you need to either walk away and process this alone, or find it within yourself to have the ability to not be triggered by something that maybe formerly triggered you. And for me personally, what I have found is a lot of this is based through my experience with exposure therapy. And I don't mean by doing this with a therapist or in a treatment facility or anything like that, but on my own, I will intentionally expose myself to things that are uncomfortable, so that way I'm able to be stronger, and that way I'm able to handle things that make me uncomfortable in a better way in the future. Okay, well, my vape is calling me, and I'm pretty clogged up, so I probably need to go blow my nose. But thank you so much for being here with me today. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and especially join. I am working on making more content for my paid memberships, and I am so grateful to everybody who has been subscribing recently. I saw the bump. I appreciate y'all very much. Y'all really made my day with that. So, have a wonderful rest of your day. Be well, stay wild as well.